Guys, so we are looking at our notes packet at section 4A. Our goal is to be able to answer questions like the sine of 7 pi over 6 is negative 1/2. We want to be able to do it that quickly. That is our goal. What we need to know in order to do it that quickly is we need to know this thing called the unit circle. Okay? We are not going to complete the unit circle today. We're leading into that, but that is our ultimate goal, is to be able to fill this in. All right, so I want to start off with this unit circle. So if you'll flip to the next page after the notes 4A, flip over here, and I want us to look at this unit circle, and we're just going to look at the degrees and how they relate to the radians. 0 degrees is also 0 radians. And it would also be called 2 pi radians. What about 90 degrees? What would it be in radians? Pi, what do you do to pi to get 90? Pi over 2 is 90. What about for 180? It's the same as just what? Pi. And then 270 is actually 180 and 90 put together. So what would you get if you added 1 pi and half a pi? 1.5 pi, which would also be 3 pi over 2, right? Okay, so now we're going to look at these angles like 30 degrees. You've got to think, what do you do to 180 to get 30? Divide by 6. So pi over 6 is 30, and you need to be able to do it just that quickly. This one also has a reference angle of 30. It's also going to have a pi over 6 in it. So looking at this one then, this is 30, right? 30 times what is 150? 5. So this is 5 pi over 6. What other one has a reference angle of 30? That's 30 away from 180. 210. So this has a reference angle of 30. So this is 30. 30 times what is 210? So this is 7 pi over 6. And what else? 330. This also has to have a pi over 6. 30 times what would be 330? 11 pi over 6 is the name of this. See how quickly we can get those radians. Remember before how we multiplied by pi over 180 and reduced? We don't have to do that because we can do it just that quick. Yep.
So 180 is really 6 pi over 6?
It is.
So it's just going up by 1 pi over 6, or 1/6 of pi.
You're right. And that's how you could actually figure out the whole unit circle. But I'm going to show you another way too. So look at this 45 degrees. What do we know about that? It's 180 divided by what? 4. What else would be 45 degrees away? 135 is also going to have a pi over 4 in it. How many 45s are in 135? 3 of them, right? Because I know 2 45s is 90. 90 plus 45 is 135. Okay, 225, that also has a pi over 4 for a reference angle. It's 45 degrees away. So what's it going to be? 5 of them, right? Think of it. 180 would be 4 pi over 4, and then we have one more 45. What about 315? What's it going to be? How many 45s? It's 7 of them, right? 7 pi over 4s. Think 7 45s. See how 45s are halfway here to 90? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 45s. See that? Okay, now what about 60? What's 60? Pi over 3. Okay. Here's another one that's 60 degrees away. So it has to have a pi over 3 in it. 60 times what? 2. Here's another one that's 60 away from the axis. So it has to have a pi over 3. 60 times what's 240? So that's 4 pi over 3. And then 300 is 60 away, so it has to have a pi over 3 in it. And it's 5 of them. Okay? So these are all the special angles that we're going to be working with right here. You're going to have to redo that on your homework. And I do not want you looking back here and just copying it. You got to be able to think it through on your own. because eventually you're going to have to fill in all these angles and all these points within a certain amount of time. Okay? All right, now let's go back to our notes. Okay, so we've been talking about what the relationship with sine, cosine, and tangent. We're going to look at sine, and if I have a triangle inside of a circle, this would be the radius, this would be x, and this would be y. Here's our angle theta. Sine is always going to be opposite over hypotenuse. But what's it going to be in terms of x, y, and r? This is review. Y over r. What is the cosine going to be?
X over R.
And what is the tangent going to be? Okay, and we're going to get to this a little bit later with this coordinates. But let's look at this real quick. Let's see if you can remember this. 30 degrees in radians. Don't say it out loud. Think about it for you have 5 seconds. I want to know what it is in radians. What is it, everybody? What is 45 degrees? 5 seconds. Give everybody time. Okay, say it. 60, 3 seconds. You guys are getting quicker. What is it? And 90? Good. 180? 270? 3 pi over 2. And then 0 and 360 is either 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so we want to be able to do it just that fast, if not even faster. Okay, so now you guys fill this in. We just talked about it. Fill in what all these would be in radians. Don't look at that circle we just did. Do it on your own. So our goal is to be able to do this without a calculator, and you should be just about finished. If you're not, you might have to memorize them. Okay, what's 30 in radians? 45. 60. 90. 180. 270. Great. Okay. Now we're going to figure out the sine. Now, when we have these angles like 0 and 360, I have to draw a circle. So I'm going to have to draw a circle. Here's where 0 and 360 would be. I'm going to let the radius of this circle be 1. If the radius of this circle is 1, then what would this point be? In the x direction, how far out would I have gone if the radius is 1? 1, and how far up or down? 0. Now, sine, I know, is y over r. So what is y over r going to be? What's 0 over 1 going to be? 0, right? Okay. The cosine here is going to be x over r, so it's going to be 1. Do you see what I'm doing?
It's a triangle.
Well, it's not a triangle in this case because it's impossible to draw a triangle. I'm just using x, y, and r. So I know cosine is x over r, so it's going to have to just be 1. Tangent is y over x. Okay, so what's y over x going to end up being? Y over x. What's 0 divided by 1?
0.
No, 0 divided by 1 is just 0. Okay. Now, for pi over 6 and 30 degrees, I can just draw a picture. But I want you to be quick with this. 30 degrees, remember the quick way. 1, radical 3, 2. And I'd rather you not even have to draw the picture and just be able to visualize it. The sine of 30, we have to do opposite over hypotenuse. Good. Go ahead and figure out the other two.
You want to put 1 comma?
Nope, I don't yet. We're going to do this later, like tomorrow. Okay, Grace, what'd you get for this?
Radical 3 over 2.
And then what'd you get for tangent?
3/3.
Great. Okay, for 45 degrees, again, you can draw the triangle if you need to. I'd love for you just to be able to visualize it without drawing it. See, this is kind of the less sophisticated way of doing it. Just visualizing it in your mind is a little better. Okay, so for sine of 45, I have to do opposite over hypotenuse, or y over r. Good. Same thing. Tangent. Good. Okay, for 60 degrees. If you need the triangle, draw it, but I'd rather you just be able to think of it. Okay, all together now, what's the sine of 60? Cosine? Tangent? Great. Okay, what am I going to have to do for 90? I can't really draw a triangle, so what do I have to do? Circle. Go back to that circle again. So I'm going to have to go back to that circle. Here's 90 degrees. This is over 0, up 1. So this point 0, 1. The radius is going to be 1. Okay, so then what's the sine going to be? Y over r. 1 over 1 is 1. What's the cosine? X over r. Tangent is y over x. Now this is 1 over 0, guys. That's going to be undefined, right? So 0 over 1 is 0. 1 over 0 is undefined. Okay, go around to 180, or pi. This is negative 1 comma 0. Everybody understand why it'd be negative 1, 0? Right. And so what's the sine going to be? Y over r, 0, cosine, and tangent? 0, right. 270, same thing. Draw your picture. 270 is down here. It's over 0, down 1. Okay, so sine is going to be y over r, negative 1. Cosine is 0, which is x over r, which is 0. Tangent is negative 1 over 0. What's that, everybody? Undefined. All right, let's flip over to the back. This is the good stuff here. This is what we really need to understand. Which trig functions are positive in quadrant 1? Well, in quadrant 1, I know x is positive, y is positive, r is always positive. So out of sine, cosine, and tangent, what's positive there? Everything, all. In quadrant 2, x is going to be negative because I'm going in the negative direction, y is positive, and r is always positive. So what's going to be positive here is only what involves y and r. So what involves y and r? Sine. Just sine. Sine and cosecant. But we're just going to do the basic ones. Sine. In quadrant 3, is x positive or negative? Y is. R is. Okay, so the only way we can get a positive is by doing y over x or x over y. So what's y? That's tangent, isn't it? In quadrant 4, x is positive, y is negative, r is always positive. So what's going to be positive here? Only what involves x and r. What is it? Cosine. Now, she says, remember this phrase, everything's positive in quadrant 1, quadrant 2, students, quadrant 3, take, quadrant 4, calculus. So what that tells me is everything that involves x, y, and r, everything's positive in quadrant 1. In quadrant 2, only sine ratios are positive. That'll make more sense when we get down here. But it also helps us with this. It says tangent's positive. Which quadrant could the terminal side of theta lie? It could be in 3, I agree. What else, though? 1, right? Everything's positive in 1. If secant is negative, what's secant the reciprocal of? No, cosine. So I'm thinking, where is cosine negative? Well, I know cosine's positive here and cosine's positive here, so where is it negative? 2 and 3. For number 3, sine has to be positive. Good. Quadrant 4, cosine is negative and cotangent is positive. But instead of thinking of cotangent, I'm going to think of tangent. So cosine has to be negative. Where's cosine negative? 2 and 3. But then tangent and cotangent must be positive. Is it just 2 or just 3? Just 3. All right, guys. So that's going to help us when we get down here to our ratios. All right, so watch closely on number 5. On number 5, the sine of 150 degrees. Which quadrant is 150 in? Quadrant 2. What's the reference angle? 30. Across from 30 is 1. Across from 60 is radical 3. This would be a 2. The radius is always positive. This y is positive. This x is negative. So the sine of 150, I have to do y over r. What's the answer? 1/2 y over r. I want to check my answer. So here's what I can do. I can just go to my mode, check and make sure I'm in degrees. You guys probably are. That's under mode. And now I can just type it in, the sine of 150, and it'll tell me it's 0.5 or 1/2. Okay? Let's go ahead and do this one. Cotangent of 315. Which quadrant is 315 in? 4. What's the reference angle? How far away are we?
45.
45. This is going to be a 1, negative 1, radical 2. Cotangent, you have to know this is x over y. X is 1, y is negative 1, so it's negative 1. In that fourth quadrant, remember how tangent's negative in that fourth quadrant, and we got a negative answer? Kind of double checking. All right, so how do we do the radians? What's pi? 180 divided by 6, what is that? Times 11. 330. Which quadrant is 330 in? Quadrant 4. So I'm 30 degrees away. That's my reference angle. 1, and that's a negative. Radical 3 and 2. So now to find cosine, I know that's going to be adjacent over hypotenuse, or x over r. Now if I wanted to check this one, it's a little trickier. I'd have to go to my mode, I'd have to go to radians, I'd have to type in the cosine of 11 pi over 6. Remember, this is irrational. That's not an exact answer. If you put that, it's not going to be counted right. Now I've got to check this. Radical, where's my radical? There it is. 3 over 2. See how they're the same, so I know we're correct? Okay? All right. Let's do the sine of 7 pi over 6. Pi is 180. 180 divided by 6 is 30. 7 times 30 is 210. I'm in the third quadrant. How far away am I?
30.
210 to 180. How far? 30. So that's 30. This is 1, positive or negative?
Negative.
This is radical 3, positive or negative?
Negative.
This is 2. So then to find my sine, I'm going to have to do my opposite, or my y over my r. So negative 1/2. Okay? And I'm going to do one more with you, and that'll finish it up for the notes. Secant of 300. How far away am I? Well, first of all, which quadrant? Fourth quadrant. How far away? 60? Not or 30, it's just 60.
Sorry, I was thinking 180.
No, it's okay. So we've got a radical 3 that's negative. This would be our 1. This would be our 2. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So instead of doing my adjacent over my hypotenuse, I have to do my hypotenuse over my adjacent. So that answer should be 2.
Wait, what did you want to do?
You can't. You always have to go off the x-axis. You always must draw that triangle to the x-axis only. Okay, let's do one more in radians, guys. I lied. One more right here. Tell me what the angle is. What's pi again? 180 divided by 3 times 4. Which quadrant?
3.
How far away?
60.
Radical 3, positive or negative? This would be, and then sine is going to be opposite over hypotenuse or y over r. Okay? That's what you're going to be doing. Any questions? All right, that was a little fast.